never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
I mean, what's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team. I would be very careful about slinging stuff. Am I going to get sued? We got legal on this?
I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Brad Spielberger joining us remotely to discuss all things NFL Cut Day, roster building, Week 1 rosters, about 98% of the way there. Brad, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Just recovering from a busy day.
Yeah, so let's discuss all of the mechanics and all of that, right? The NFL used to do Cut Day in 2 or 3 different waves, right? You get that first wave. It was the guys you knew weren't going to make the roster, but you had to keep enough guys to play preseason week 4, and then right after that, you'd have that Saturday. Sometimes it'd be like the first Saturday of college football, and middle of college football, you'd be getting trades and releases, but now they said it's just one day. So yesterday, literally over 1,000 players cut. What went into some of the decisions and the way the NFL changes? What's your take on how the NFL changed this whole process?
Yeah, it actually does have a couple, kind of trickle-down effects. I think the biggest is you mentioned having to have enough players to play in those preseason games. I had a conversation with someone at a club recently who was talking about we used to not really, notice if a player, a contributor was getting snaps in the second half of a preseason game. They'd say, well, the team probably has some injuries there. They just need a body to go out there and play. But now, with 90-man rosters, if there is a guy who was a regular season contributor in the past who's playing into the second half of preseason games, it does kind of hit a light bulb, because you say, okay, they could probably find somebody else to take these snaps. Why is this guy playing? So I think that's one big thing. And then you start to get some more trade calls, more things happening. I think we saw, as a result, a lot more swaps yesterday and little, future conditional pick moves, things like that, because I think they do have a better understanding of who's on the roster, who's not, or who could be available. But yeah, it has changed the dynamics of the cut down day.
Now, look, full disclosure, I might be all over the place here today because a lot happened. I've got a printout. I highlighted some names. I get the hard copy of all, I might just be all over the place here today. But I want to start. So Jonathan Taylor, the Colts team building effort, there's a couple different things I wanted to discuss there, but Jonathan Taylor had, was it a self-imposed deadline, or was it more just the mechanics of the way the roster rules work? Jonathan Taylor not traded by the Colts, so what happens now to Jonathan Taylor?
Colts kind of imposed deadline, because the thinking there was, if you want to trade for him and get him on your roster and not leave him on the PUP list, which now he is on, cannot play for a month. Even if he gets traded tomorrow, he's still out for a month. The Colts were basically saying, get this deal done, and then you can activate him off PUP and maybe only keep him out for 2 weeks instead of 4, or whatever you want to do. So that was the soft deadline that existed. It sounds like the Colts never came off of their very high asking price, though, of either a first-round pick or a package of picks equivalent to a first-round pick, which was just simply never going to happen. When you hear things like that, I always say, okay, so they don't want to trade him, and they don't plan on trading him. So what happens now is, yeah, he's out for the first month. He needs to get healthy from that ankle injury, but when he comes back, is he going to play? Is there going to be more headaches? To a degree, though, he has to report and be ready to play. If he tries to hold out longer than that and just not report whatever, the Colts can toll his contract, meaning that this year would not count. They can say, okay, you're under the 4th year of your rookie deal again next year. Not even a franchise tag. We're just rolling it over. So week 5, things are going to get very interesting once again.
Yeah, so Taylor, the Colts really have the leverage, right? Because if Taylor does want to get out of Indianapolis, he has to play, as you said, to get that 4th year, to become a free agent. And missing the first 4 games for a guy coming off injury, not the worst thing in the world. And again, the Colts, from a trading standpoint, had to weigh what they're getting offered with what they could get if Taylor walks, what they want to get from Taylor in season here. Kind of an ugly situation. I know we've talked a lot about running backs. I know you've talked a lot about running backs, but overall, where do you see the position going? Do you think there's ever going to be any sort of reset where running backs get paid a little bit if they end up the best guys? Because, it doesn't get that much better than Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, and Jonathan Taylor. So this looks like a serious tipping point for the league.
100%. And I think, people look back and like to kind of poke fun at Le'Veon Bell and, say, oh, he missed out on this money, yada, yada, yada. To a degree, though, I think these guys are thinking of the position group at large and not just themselves. Zeke Elliott famously, when it was after his 3rd season, went down to Cabo, gained about 20 pounds, pulled a James Harden, but it led to, one of the best contracts at the position in the history of the sport. Arguably the best. McCaffrey got a little bit more on an annual basis, but Zeke's guarantees were super strong. The cash flows were pretty strong. So anyway, I think it's Taylor saying, look, you're talking about a first-team All-Pro rushing leader, a guy who until last season hadn't missed a practice apparently since high school or something like that, and now you can't even pay him. And for me, I think the biggest kind of hypocrisy with the whole thing is the Colts basically said, okay, we're not going to pay Jonathan Taylor a market rate deal. However, we need a first-round pick or a package of picks equivalent. So is he valuable or not? And I've said this on shows before, but I also think it's funny. I just mentioned Christian McCaffrey. A week before the Colts traded up to take Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey signed his deal for $16 million a year. Like, you knew exactly what you were getting into. I know the market dynamics have changed. You shouldn't pay, $100 for a $5 item just because it used to be $100 5 years ago. But I think we're approaching a rock bottom. I really do.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor specifically definitely has a decision to make when he gets back in week 5, and you have a decision to make as a parent. Fall's all about back to school and back to routine, checklists, but the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future. How about that, Brad? Starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life. Make it quick and easy and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Brad, the Colts aren't the most popular team in the world, but I want to finish with this on their team-building effort. As I was tweeting through it yesterday, I love looking at what's remaining on the roster. In the Colts, trade Stephon Gilmore at cornerback this offseason. Here's what they're left with. Basically a whole bunch of tall, long, athletic corners who have not played football. They're outside corners. So you take Kenny Moore, he's their slot, their nickel, out of the equation. They're rolling with Dallas Flowers, 2022 undrafted free agent. Darrell Baker Jr., 2022 undrafted free agent. And then 2 rookies, Juju Brents and Jalen Jones. Brents was a 2nd rounder out of Kansas State. Jalen Jones, a 7th round pick. My guy, Darius Rush, gets cut. 5th rounder. So that's a whole different story. We could talk about that in a second. But the Colts at the cornerback position, Dallas Flowers on their outside corners. He has 175 defensive snaps. The other 3 have 0. I don't know if I've ever seen a cornerback room this inexperienced. And not just inexperienced. It's not like they've got a first and it's UDFAs and a 2nd rounder in Juju Brents. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't think we've seen this other places, but I will say I think we have seen some teams and the Colts maybe falling into this bucket. In particular, their big ticket free agent signing, kind of the only one they made outside of giving a kicker, massive money for some reason. But you bring in Samson Ebukam, with all due respect to Matt Gay. You bring in Samson Ebukam as your big ticket signing. You obviously already have DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart on the middle, a very good interior, and then you want to see growth from Deo Dangbo and Kwity Paye and a lot of these young guys along the line. But I think, you look at San Francisco, you look at some teams, I guess they did just pay Charvarius Ward, but we've seen teams around the NFL where they say, we're going to spend crazy amounts of money up front. And the drawback, or the trade-off, I should say, is you don't really spend in the secondary and say, hey, if we get pressure in 2.5 seconds or less every snap, we can have some, good athletes, guys that can mirror and do whatever. Maybe that's the Colts approach, but it's certainly going to be interesting.
All right, I want to talk about the Vikings a little bit too, because there's a similar cornerback room. So I'm just going to fly around the league and we'll just talk about whatever, and you could bring stuff up. You could talk about the Bears in a minute here. But the Vikings have a similar cornerback situation. And so, like with the Colts, I can almost justify it, right? I mean, there are certain schemes, as you mentioned, depending on the pass rush. And when you play a zone-heavy scheme, there is actually way more pressure on your linebackers and safeties when you're playing zone. But when you're playing man, clearly the pressure's on your corners. And the Vikings bring in Brian Flores, who likes to play man more than anybody. And they've got a similar situation, fifth-round rookie Mekhi Blackman, Caleb Evans, who only has about a couple hundred snaps in his career, Andrew Booth, barely 100 snaps in his career. So they've got 3 corners. Now, Byron Murphy, again, he'll play slot, but the Vikings are rolling in for a scheme that probably needs corners unless Brian Flores is going to adjust things. Very inexperienced cornerback room. I know there's always more moves to be made, but fascinating approach here by the Vikings, and a couple other moves that they've made as well.
Yeah, this one's weird because I think you look at it and you say, oh, well, maybe Andrew Booth had a great camp and, he's looking like the guy they thought they were going to get last year. That's not what the reporting has been, at least. So, yeah, it is interesting. And then also you talk about pass rush. Zadarius Smith's 80 pressures are no longer on the team. Dalvin Tomlinson's an awesome football player in all facets. He's no longer on the team, obviously now in Cleveland. If it's interesting because Brian Flores, a phenomenal defensive coach, probably a very sought-after defensive coordinator, and he did have he had a couple of head coach interviews, and he had a couple of DC interviews as well. I love Danielle Hunter. I love Harrison Smith, whatever, but this is one of the least talented defenses in the entire NFL. And yeah, they were very, very bad last year, but can Flores work his magic and make them, a top 20 defense? It's going to be hard to do.
One other thing that the Vikings did that we didn't know how it was going to play out until they made the final cuts, but around draft time, undrafted free agency, they paid a ton of money for 2 guys, Andre Carter from Army and Ivan Pace, local hero here at Cincinnati. Love Ivan Pace. But Sam and I talked about Carter at the time. He was last year at this time talked about as a fringe first rounder, a top 50 caliber player. Didn't have the type of senior year that maybe people expected at Army, was kind of underweight as well because you've got this Army workout regime and he's got this big, long frame and he was probably playing undersized. And the Vikings end up paying over $300,000 guaranteed to bring Andre Carter in as an undrafted free agency. There's an article on ESPN.com breaking that down as well today. Discuss the economics of undrafted free agency versus late round picks. Is this an edge that certain teams are tapping into? Is this something that Kwesi has found where you can overpay for these undrafted free agents and, take some shots?
It's a new thing we've seen probably over the last 5 years or so. Philadelphia's been doing it, shocker. They've been doing it kind of since the beginning. A couple other teams as well, where, you do have a pool of signing bonus you're allowed to give that every team gets that is not a very big amount of money. So what they do instead is they guarantee a certain amount of salary. To a degree, really what you're guaranteeing is just, hey, you're making at minimum, you're making our practice squad. So you're locked into, $200,000, whatever. But when a guy like Carter, a non-quarterback gets $300,000, so, almost double what he would make on the practice squad, it sticks out, right? I mean, he's legitimately getting more guarantees than late 6th round picks, which is notable. And yes, it is. I think it's hard to think of a story of a guy that then turned into a great player, but you do see guys make rosters and guys be factors over the last couple of years because of these payments. Like I said, Eagles have done it. I think Kwesi definitely identified 2 good players. I'm excited about Ivan Pace. I think he's going to, start or have a significant role in this defense with Brian Asamoah and some of the veterans they have there. But yeah, it's a smart market to tap into, and not to give away any tricks or anything, but these phone calls from teams to agents are happening about the middle of the 5th round, trying to figure these things out. It is not like they're waiting until the end of the draft to get this thing done.
Do you think the NFL is going to ever try to overregulate undrafted free agency? I know there's not a lot of big names there, but the NFL has tried to monetize the schedule release, right? I mean, they have a show to release the schedule. So would they ever have, I don't know, day 4 of the NFL draft, Sunday undrafted free agency, and hat selections and everything. I don't know if there's enough big names to make that happen, but in the future, if the NFL can get their hands on it, regulate something, I don't know if that's ever in the cards for undrafted free agency.
I would never doubt the NFL trying to turn something into a money grab and a TV show that us sickos will probably watch more than we watch most programming on television. But the current construct would just be a series of phone calls and mayhem. I don't know how you'd put that out there, but yeah, maybe.
What do you make of what the Vikings have done the last couple of years, right? I mean, I feel like they're one of the teams that they were saddled with some contracts that they got rid of this year. You've got Kirk Cousins, who's, a top half of the league quarterback, top 10 caliber quarterback, so you can win with him. At the same time, there's this massive youth movement, right? So you've got to turn over the roster. I think the Titans are kind of in the same boat where they're half rebuilding but half trying to compete with their moves. What do you make of teams that feel like they're in this middle world of rebuilding and competing?
I did feel like last year may have been the year where it was smart to kind of get out of some of these deals and cut your losses. But I think now you look back in hindsight, not just because of their record, but look, Adam Thielen still got paid. Eric Kendrick still got paid. Like, they probably arguably still did get out 1 year early before things really fell off a cliff. I don't think Thielen looked like himself last year, but sounds like maybe some injuries going on there. So the one thing for me that I was, adamantly opposed to was if they just got rid of Danielle Hunter as well. Because then it's like, all right, you're going to have the worst defense in the NFL. And again, I think they were bottom 5 last year. So they have enough there that I still think the offense is going to be one of the best in the NFL. They're going to score a whole lot of points and maybe just hope they can do enough on defense in a bad NFC. But it's weird. I think people kind of, I don't know, like moving on from the guys they moved on from, I think was kind of expected outside of, I suppose, Darius Smith. But he got more money in a raise. He chopped off a year of his contract. He was a pending free agent. I think they're doing we hear the term competitive rebuild probably 1,000 times an offseason. I think they're like the most picture perfect example of what that actually looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm more sensitive to it now, but I feel like back in the day that it did happen more often. You let veterans walk and young players came in and they were unproven and it was like it's a young man's game, right? You have to let people walk, and now it feels like, oh man, what are they doing? What are they doing? But they're letting at some point you got to let the veterans walk and see what the youth can do. It doesn't always work, but fascinating, I think, watching what the Vikings are doing. Let's call it popcorning sometimes, popcorn around the league with all the different teams here. What are the Patriots doing at quarterback? They released Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham. They have no backup. And I don't know if Brian Hoyer is going to be on a plane to go save them. What are the Patriots going to do at backup QB?
Yeah, Brian Hoyer and your agent, stick by the phone. But yeah, I do think it's interesting. I saw a report, I think from Diana Rossini right before it came on, that they want Bailey Zappi back on the practice squad if he clears waivers, which I suppose he can. I mean, he was 2-0 with a 9 yards per attempt above 9 last year in his start. So you'd think a team like Cincinnati by you or someone maybe would at least consider making him the backup. There are actually a handful of teams that don't have a good number 2 right now, but I don't know. I really don't know what they're doing. Is it a Mac Jones power play? I don't really think so. My real answer is, as good as Zappi did look at times, he has a massive issue with fumbling the football. And if there's one thing we know about Bill Belichick, it's you can't fumble the football and keep your job. Ball security is job security, and I think we saw that play out yesterday.
Bailey Zappi, 2-0 as a starter last year, beat the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns as starter. Now, he didn't really play he played all right. He was fine. But remember, against the Bears on Monday Night Football, Mac Jones coming off an injury, not looking great. Mac throws an interception, and Bailey Zappi comes in. Bill Belichick didn't call it a benching, but it was just, no, we just made a move. Bailey Zappi came in. And Gillette Stadium went nuts. And then it was unbelievable. It was like every time Bailey Zappi ran play action, it was like the defense didn't know what they were seeing. It was like, I'm going to bite. I got to, and then there's busted coverages everywhere. He throws a touchdown on a busted coverage, and Gillette Stadium was rocking like it was the AFC Championship. And then it all fell apart. Then he wasn't good for the rest of the game. The Bears crushed the Patriots, and we didn't see much from Zappi after that. Just an interesting, quick, couple week turn of events where Zappi was like this cult hero. And of course, anytime a late round quarterback has any success, people are like, oh, next Tom Brady. Could be the next Tom Brady. You never know. Brock Purdy.
We'll always have Zappi hour, Steve. We'll always have Zappi hour.
We'll always have Zappi hour with the Patriots. So we'll keep an eye on their quarterback situation. I think they do want to bring Zappi back, but it's an interesting one with just Mac Jones on the roster right now. What are the Bears doing? What about the Bears? I saw this stat. Ryan Poles has been there 2 years now. Only 11 players remain from the previous regime. This is Ryan Poles' team. And what do you make of everything the Bears are doing, and then coming into cut day and what the rebuild looks like in Chicago?
I think the stat may have actually even been before the waiver of Travis Gibson and Kendall Vilder. I think it's down to 9 the last time I saw it. So, look, I mean, he made it clear he wanted to get young. The team is now, the average age is under 25 years old, and that's even with the addition of 39-year-old ageless wonder Mercedes Lewis in the fold. But I think you're also seeing the team just take the shape of what they want to be as football players, where, Eberflus's defense, I think, didn't really – look, he wants these big, Tyreek Stevenson, Darius Rush type guys at corner, which wasn't really, the guys that were in place before he got there. On offense, the guards have gotten, smaller but faster, better for outside zone. Obviously, you add the tight ends, Tunyon and Lewis. They're going to run, I think, a lot more 12 personnel now. So, they focus on the offense. The defensive line, I think, is still going to be one of the worst in the NFL, but to a degree, I think it would say, okay, you have a three receiver, trio that is pretty solid with the addition of DJ Moore and Chase Claypool. I mentioned the tight ends plus Cole Kmet. I actually love the backfield. I think it's the perfect modern construction of an NFL backfield. Late round picks in Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson, and then a solid veteran who looked good last year in Deontay Foreman. So, long answer short, they're younger, they're faster, they're going to play more physical, they're going to be disciplined. They were actually very low in penalties last year, but the talent needs to just get better and develop. Like, I still think they're a 7-8 win football team, but that's what you get when you go that young and give reps to rookies and sophomores.
Sometimes I like it, man. I like watching the young teams. The NFC North with all the turnover with the Vikings, with turnover with the Bears, with the Packers, maybe the youngest team in the NFL. Their last 2 draft classes are going to be all over the field in Green Bay, plus Jordan Love at the helm. And it's like the Lions are like the veterans of the division there in Detroit, which is just crazy. It is unbelievable. I meant to ask you at the top, just for our listeners, when we see veterans released and then they're brought back after week 1, what can you just lay out simply what's happening there? Why are players getting released and coming back? What are the financial implications that we're looking at there?
Yeah, it's actually one of my biggest gripes with NFL reporters when they say that a veteran's contracts become guaranteed if they're on the roster in week 1. That is not the situation. But what's happening is it's called termination pay. If you're a nerd, it's Article 30 of the CBA if you want to go read it. Essentially what it is if you are a vested veteran, so you've been 4+ years in the NFL, if you stay on the roster in week 1, your contract then is protected in that if you are cut after that date, you can file a claim for termination pay and get your entire salary paid to you. If you're cut before week 1 and then brought back and you get cut again, your termination pay is then only, I think it's like 35% of your remaining salary. So it's really just protecting the teams for, a couple $100,000. But that's why they do it. These rosters are not final. We're going to see that across the NFL. I think I saw Cole Beasley with the Giants is going to probably be brought back. That's what's going on right now across the league.
College football fans, are you ready for week 1? DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking you up with a can't-miss offer to start the season strong. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on college football and score $200 in bonus bets instantly. Anything can happen in college football. Your team can go from unranked to dynasty mode in just a couple years. Change comes fast, and the only thing that's a lock is the great offers from DraftKings Sportsbook. Life's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code PFF. New customers can score $200 in bonus bets instantly when they bet just $5 on college football. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code PFF. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All right, Brad, I don't know if we'll put you on the spot here for a minute, but I want to talk Chris Jones still. Any other big names? Are there any other big names that could be moving? It did feel like this offseason, sure, there was movement and everything. Let me just throw this out there quick. I feel like the depth around the league is actually pretty solid. I feel like a lot of teams feel pretty good about their roster, but are there any other big names that could be on the move or that you're keeping an eye on, or big stories that we could be looking at here leading up to the season?
This might not fall into the biggest of names, but I'll double down on something I put out on the website earlier this week, and Lions fans were really loving me on Twitter after I put it out. But James Houston with the Detroit Lions, the edge rusher, who obviously was a rookie last year, had 8 sacks for the team, 6th-round pick, got cut, got brought back, and then was very good in a pure designated pass rusher role. Look, he was playing 20-plus snaps in the second half of preseason games when nobody else on Detroit was playing. I'm telling you, I don't know if he's going to get traded, but I think he is available for a trade. And if a team calls and makes a solid offer, which, look, Detroit shouldn't give him up for nothing.
Did we lose Brad?
Former 3rd-round pick. They feel like they have depth there, and obviously have some things to figure out on offense. So, yeah, again, not a huge name, but a good, exciting rookie that's very, very good in a particular role. I'm not promising he's going to get traded, but it certainly wouldn't shock me.
All right, a couple other trades that occurred yesterday. The Las Vegas Raiders trade defensive tackle Neil Farrell to the Kansas City Chiefs. And so he's your Chris Jones replacement. Neil Farrell's coming in to replace Chris Jones. What's happening with Chris Jones? By all reports, he's claiming he will hold out the first 8 weeks of the season. Why is it 8 weeks? What's happening? What do you think is going to happen with Chris Jones? And then we'll dissect a little Neil Farrell here in a minute. Did we lose him? Was that just me? Well, I have to be professional here, and I'm going to run the show by myself. This is what happens on live TV. Because we've lost Brad. We'll get him back here. And I was just looking up Neil Farrell so I could give you some data. This is the dream, though. Steve flying solo.
Over $1 million in these game checks, because of the fact that he's not on.
Let's cut him off. Cut Brad off. I'm running the show. Sorry. Brad, you broke up, man. I don't know what happened here. Neil Farrell Jr. comes in, 2022 4th-round pick for Las Vegas. Had a decent little, where are we at here? Preseason, 65 grade. Last year, just 158 snaps for the Raiders. A 35 overall grade for Neil Farrell. So he's a big dude, and he's coming in. I mean, he's not coming in to save the Chiefs or anything like that, but they've got some questions to answer on their defensive front. Charles Omenihu is suspended. They brought him in free agency this offseason. Charles Omenihu is suspended for the first 6 games of the season, and then Chris Jones says he's going to hold out. Brad, I don't know if anybody heard anything that you said, so let's. Do you want to try it again with the Chris Jones analysis?
Take it from the top. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah,
Yes, Chris Jones. Neil Farrell plus a little bit of talent there. So the deals with Chris Jones is he's now on the did not report list, which means he is not actually on the Chiefs roster right now. He is not counted against their 53-man roster. His salary is technically off the books right now. So they sort of just cleared a whole bunch of cap space, but not really. But he's already accrued $2 million in fines. And now for each game he misses, he'll lose over $1 million in game checks until he does finally report. The reason he mentioned week 8 is that there is a certain timeline to where the Chiefs could basically toll his contract, meaning they would carry it over. He would not be a free agent after the season, just like I talked about with Jonathan Taylor. So he'll be back at some point. I do think there's teeth to his holdout. He might not report at all. My understanding is the overall value probably is a problem, but the guaranteed money he's looking for is just simply not in a realm the Chiefs are willing to entertain. I think this is the beginning of a saga that's going to continue for a couple more weeks.
Yeah, we know how much of an impact Chris Jones has, as I mentioned earlier. Charles Omenihu also going to be suspended. Look, the Chiefs are still going to be favored in every game and all that, but we know there's a fine line in the NFL losing that impact player on the defensive side of the ball, even if it is just the first half-ish of the season. Could end up, as far as seeding goes, you lose an extra game here and there. That stuff absolutely could add up here for the Chiefs. Anything else? I'm just gonna go through my sheet, things that stood out. Do you want to talk kickers?
Let's do it.
So you've done a lot of work on the draft, value of draft picks and everything. I've got a take on kickers. I think we're a little harsh on the kicker analysis, but we see guys like Cade York from the Browns drafted, cut, and then the Browns have to trade for Dustin Hopkins. That's the most I'm going to name kickers on the show. I don't do it. I just don't name special teamers on the show. I mean, people know they're asking for more punting analysis. I'm like, I'm not going to give it to you. I can't do it. I try to watch every game on Sunday at the same time. I get 8 games, maybe 10 at a time. And as soon as special teams come out, I'm off that game. It's just how I do it. I'm off that game, right? As soon as I know there's a kick happening, I got to go to the next game. I got to watch real football plays. So I'm not going to talk special teams. The most we discuss is never draft kickers, right? That's the word going around here. What's going on with the kicker market, and should you ever draft a kicker?
No, you should not. I will say this. Okay, 7th round pick, sure, go ahead. But when you're using a pick that could actually be a legitimate player on either side of the football, there isn't even a history of success. I mean, the Buccaneers traded up for Roberto Aguayo in the 2nd round, didn't even make the team or whatever, barely stayed on the team for a significant period of time. You have Daniel Carlson, the Vikings draft him, trade him to the Raiders, or cut him, he goes to the Raiders. Matt Gay, a guy we talked about earlier, I'm mentioning all sorts of kickers now, goes to the Bucs again or the Rams, whoever he was in the beginning, he gets, get let go. So you're not even hitting on these players. Yes, Cincinnati Bengals legend Evan McPherson, I suppose, is a hit. But I'll stop naming kickers now as well. That's the end of the list. But no, you might as well light the draft pick on fire. If it is a first 5-round pick and you're taking a kicker, I think it's an automatic bad pick. I don't care about the context at all.
Yeah, my basic take on kickers is, because we've done a ton of analysis on predicting kicker ability is, futile, right? Like you can't do it. But I think it's because there's only 32 jobs, right? Like if you put every position and put it at the same standard of kicker, and you said there's only 32, you have to be one of the best 32 or you're a failure. And if you're kicker 24 to 32, you're also kind of a failure because we want to get better. So it's really, you got to be better, like one of the top 15 or 20, or else we're going to be looking elsewhere. If we put every position up to that standard, left tackle, quarterback, we already kind of do it, which feels like, hey, it's really tough to hit on quarterbacks. I mean, it's easier to hit on receivers because they get to be wide receiver 2, 3. They get to just be a deep threat. They get to just be a yak guy. A corner can be a number 2 corner or a nickel. They could also sit for a year or two and then eventually play. Kickers don't get to sit. They don't get to be a backup. And they have to be a top 15 or 20 guy or you feel like a failure right off the bat. So that's part of the reason why I think it feels so bad to be able to actually hit on kickers, right? It's difficult to have a good hit rate.
That's the thing too, right? You're in Cleveland this year. You're that front office, even though you just used the 4th-round pick on them last year. But they can't afford to lose games. And I mean, even think back to last year. It's not just his preseason. He missed an extra point in the 31-30 loss to the Jets last year. Like, I know he won them a game with a 58-yarder in Week 1. So I'm not trying to just pile on Cade York here, but there is no patience. You can't wait for him to figure it out if it's mental or if he has a nagging injury. He's just done, right? There's no ability to hold on to that player. I guess he could go on IR or whatever, but that is the issue. Like you just said, he could sit on the bench, he could be a special teamer or whatever. That is not the case for kickers.
All right, so you just recently moved to Pittsburgh, is that correct?
I'm moving there in July, soon.
So you're in PFF is getting their tentacles into Pittsburgh here, which is, look, of all the fan bases where there might be a clashing of styles, Pittsburgh is near the top. Fan bases, media, the whole thing. I've got some media friends over there, but like the old school media resides in Pittsburgh there, But I have been incredibly positive about the Steelers this offseason. After years of being a little negative toward the Steelers and their team building effort, I have not had a bad thing to say about Pittsburgh this entire offseason. Are you in agreement? Where do you stand, Omar Khan, and the job that he's doing in Pittsburgh?
I'm with you 110%. I think they've had a flawless offseason. I really, really do. And I think it continued even into this morning where I was on a Pittsburgh radio yesterday and they said, name one thing they could do. I said, I'd still love to see some secondary depth maybe added to the roster. Oh, here comes in Desmond King, a guy we've loved for a very long time, can play in the slot, can play a little bit on the outside as well. I think he's a good fit in this system and this defense as well. It's exactly what they needed to do. But I love their draft class. I love Keanu Benton. Sounds like Darnell Washington is healthy and ahead of where they even thought he was going to be. The funny thing is, Look, I love Isaac Seumalo. I'll go on forever. The funny thing is, and I like Broderick Jones, but he might not even start week one. It sounds like Dan Moore has had that good of a camp, but because everything else has been so good, the entire offseason top to bottom, I'm not even sure people are going to say, oh, we traded up to the 14th overall and the kid's not even starting. They don't even care because everything else is going so well.
Yeah, and Kenny Pickett's looking really good. It's about 15 dropbacks. It's kind of like our Jordan Love analysis last year. Hey, Jordan Love looked good in 12 dropbacks last year, therefore he's ready. But Pickett looked pretty good down the stretch. I thought, throwing the ball wise, he looked fine. The scheme wasn't great last year, but limited time during the preseason, all the highlights from camp and everything, looks like Pickett could be ready for a big step forward here. So, yeah, AFC North is going to be really tight, man. It's going to be like one of those four teams is going to be really disappointed at the end of the year, and I don't think it's because they're going to have it might be injuries, but it's not because they did a bad job, I don't think, building their team. Unless Deshaun Watson just never gets back to his old form or Kenny Pickett just never really develops. I think all four teams have done such a good job in the AFC North. I can't wait. Can't wait to see all of that unfold. How about some Kelvin Joseph trade for Noah Igbenogany? How about that one? My old friend Eric Eager jumped the gun. He said that's James Baldwin for A.J. Jenkins. A couple former high picks, same position, didn't work out in the one situation. They get traded in year 3 or 4. I love those. Hey, you didn't work out here. This guy didn't work out here. Let's just flip it and see what happens. Igbenogany goes to the Cowboys. Kelvin Joseph from the Cowboys to the Dolphins. Any thoughts?
No, it is truly just say, hey, hopefully a change of scenery and a reset will help you figure things out. Joseph, I think, does carry special teams value. I'd be lying if I said I checked Noah Igbenogany's participation on special teams, but I've seen Joseph as a gunner. I've seen him make some plays in that regard, and maybe that's all it is. But he's the more recent pick. I want to say a year after Igbenogany, maybe even 2 years after. But yeah, it's just a swap of failed picks with the original team, and hopefully things work out. But I do like Joseph, even if he's just a special teamer. Miami doesn't care. They didn't make the pick. I think there's some value there by itself.
All right, we're going to fly around the league here. Just the stuff that I had highlighted, some of the stuff that I found interesting that happened yesterday. So speaking of the Steelers, they traded guard Kevin Dotson to the Rams. I think it's a good buy low for the Rams. The Steelers have all this offensive line depth. Dotson's played pretty well, been a better pass protector than a run blocker. Rams also, they're going to have, it's a group of teenagers and Aaron Donald and Matthew Stafford there, but they end up releasing Logan Bruss last year. He was their pick at 103 or whatever it was, their first draft pick, and they were drafting for need and said, we got to fill this one guard spot on our defending Super Bowl champion roster. Bruss has battled injuries, but now Dotson can maybe step into that spot. I thought that was an interesting move yesterday by the Rams, and also they end up releasing the one guy that they were hoping to peg in as a starter when they drafted him last year.
The Phoenix Suns scouting department should hang out and just figure out what to do and how to make it look like they're doing work. Just kind of, touch the keypad until things happen. It's never good when your first pick in the class is already off the team. But I do like the move for Dotson. I think he was just thrown in with Pittsburgh too early and was asked to do too much too early, and it kind of destroyed his confidence or whatever the case may be there. But yeah, credit to Pittsburgh. We just talked about not just the starters, but the fact that you have, Nate Herbig, I think, is a good depth guard. Obviously, Mason Cole in the fold. I think he's going to start at center, but can play all different spots across the line. They have this luxury available to them because they also built good depth behind this O-line.
All right, I'm going to take a chance here. I'm going to ask the chat. Let us know, what teams do you want us to discuss if we haven't talked about your team. There might not be exciting things about your team, or we might not know it right off the top of our head, but we'll give you some team analysis here between Brad and I. I don't know if we've discussed it here on the PFF NFL podcast yet, and I probably should have led with this, but the Trey Lance deal that went down over the weekend, haven't even gotten to that yet. But Trey Lance getting traded from the 49ers to the Dallas Cowboys. We're not going to have this stupid debate radio, Tyler, put the headline, is Dak Prescott's job, is it in danger because the third string quarterback from the 49ers has been traded? No, obviously not. But what do you make of Dallas trading for Trey Lance, especially given the mechanics of where he is on his rookie contract compared to Dak and all that stuff?
Yeah, I really like the move. And I think you've seen this offseason. Dallas has finally looked across town to the Philadelphia Eagles, their bitter rivals, and said, enough of hearing about Howie Roseman and hearing about all the edges he finds in football, in talent evaluation, whatever. And one of my favorite quotes of all time from Howie Roseman is, he says, I'm in a quarterback development job. That industry, that's what I do. I develop quarterbacks, not just starters, but backups you can then trade for value, et cetera, et cetera. And so what do the Cowboys do? They sign a bunch of analytics staffers. I'm not saying they're the reason they made this trade, but we know Jerry didn't talk to his GM or his head coach about it. Maybe he talked to John Park and some of the new hires in the analytics staff about it. So, but yeah, I mean, it's always smart. These guys retain value forever. I know Lance just went for a 4th-round pick, so not a lot of value, but he has no, passing attempts in college or the pros. He's still super young. Remember coming out, he apparently was a very smart guy. I think he just lost confidence and was on a team where they were too good to have patience and develop him. It just simply wasn't going to work. I love the buy low for Dallas. No, I don't think it materially impacts Dak. I think maybe in extension talks, you just now can say, instead of saying, hey, we have Cooper Rush, you can say, hey, we have a developmental kid we like, so we're not going to give you $80 million a year. But I don't think it materially impacts Dak, just a little bit, just something, in the back of your mind when you're in those negotiations.
I kept wanting the 49ers to maybe use Trey Lance as a change of pace. I really thought, even when Jimmy Garoppolo was the starter, they might say, okay, we'll have a tight red zone package for Trey Lance and use his running ability and everything. And again, I'm not saying take Dak Prescott off the field. I think you want if you have a good quarterback, he's the best weapon you have in the red zone. But I am always interested in that. I think Dak could be a really good runner, but you might not want to expose him to those extra hits. Maybe a couple plays here and there. You put a Trey Lance in and, win the math game up front in the tight red zone. Lose Zeke,
I agree with you.
Right? Replace some Zeke production close to the to the end
he
zone.
could replace Zeke at center maybe for that playoff game
Yes.
as well. But no, I mean, like the Marcus Mariotas, the guys that have come in and play, back with John Gruden back in the day, you've seen it work. Yeah, I do think you have a couple packages, Taysom Hill-esque packages, I suppose, just to keep the defense on their toes. Why not?
All right, I asked the chat, name some teams. They want to know about the Jets. What are your thoughts on the Jets, where they are, of course, Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers becoming really likable because we've got a microphone on him and he says some funny things right now, so people like him on Hard Knocks. Are the Jets equipped to make this Super Bowl run that people are expecting for them?
Well, so I was at practice last Wednesday, so exactly a week ago today. And I'll tell you, the defensive line, I think, is one of the deepest and most talented I've seen in a very long time. I mean, Bryce Huff and Jermaine Johnson were winning almost every single rep, but that is also, at the same time, the scary part is that Rodgers was, and some of it was by design, but he completed a lot of nice passes. He had an awesome pass to Garrett Wilson. The highlight of the day was a touchdown to Allen Lazard. Every single one of those passes were while he was scrambling because his offensive line had gotten beaten off the snap, and then he had to kind of run for his life. So, I do think they are equipped to do it. I was also there the day that Corey Davis, I guess, announced he's retiring from football. I think they maybe do need to look into adding more talent at wide receiver. Not right now, but maybe down the road if a name presents itself. But yes, I think they are a contender. I really, really do. And I think this defense is special.
The Jets' offensive line is absolutely their biggest story heading into the season, and we mentioned a ton of times on the show here that Josh Jones, former Arizona Cardinal now, would be the perfect guy, a backup tackle who's played successfully on the left side, and the Cardinals were showcasing him at right tackle as well. And the Texans trade for Josh Jones instead for a 5th rounder in exchange of a 7. I mean, it just felt like a perfect fit for the Jets, but I don't know. They've got Mekhi Becton at right tackle. Do they feel good enough about him? The depth on the offensive line for the Jets absolutely scares me. And you said you saw it at practice. I think we've seen it a little bit in the preseason. All the reports from practice, that is the one thing I think that could derail the Jets season, and they just have to keep an eye on, what could be available as a plug and play, which is usually not much when it comes to offensive line.
It's funny. It's like I think will be fine on the offensive line if Mekhi Becton stays good at right tackle. I think he has looked good and stays healthy, which he never has. And then if a 39-year-old Dwayne Brown, who's coming off of rotator cuff surgeries on both shoulders, if those guys stay healthy, I love their interior. I think they have a great interior kind of swing guard center and Joe Tippmann. I like bringing back, Connor McGovern for basically a minimum contract. I think once you get a healthy Elijah Vera Tucker, he's a stud. And I think Laken Tomlinson needs to play a little better than last year, but is a good player. Like, they're held together by duct tape and prayers. But if it works out, then it's hard to find a weakness on this roster.
We have a request for some Eagles analysis. They made a shrewd, under-the-radar Howie type of move yesterday. They signed Isaiah Rodgers, the former Colts cornerback who's suspended for the season for the gambling issue. He had a pretty nice season last year for the Colts. They get to stash him Calvin Ridley style, the way that the Jags did. What are your thoughts overall on the Eagles? Can they get back to the Super Bowl with what they've done this offseason?
Yeah, so I actually was at Eagles camp the day before. I was at Jets camp, and they were going up against the Colts. I'll say this. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and I know we just talked about how the Colts are rostering a bunch of rookie or undrafted corners, but they didn't get stopped on a single rep the entire day. It's not even exaggerating. They made the catch every single time, whether it was 7-on-7, 1-on-1, 11-on-11, it did not matter. But for me with them, their depth at receiver and their depth at corner is interesting. Look, I love all four starters. I also love Darius Slay and James Bradbury, but it gets interesting. And then you have Keely Ringo and Elijah Ricks and some of these names. And at receiver, obviously Quiz Watkins is a good player. But if they get an injury to one of those spots, which of course you can say about any roster, but then it gets a little interesting to me where there's just a little bit of fragility. But also Jalen Carter was also dominant that day. The defensive line is going to be insane. Nolan Smith was kind of beating guys around the corner. Beat Bernard Raymond a couple times where he was just too small, but kind of bendy for Raymond to do anything. They're loaded again. I just am kind of concerned about if one of those top corners or receivers go down, what do they do?
Yeah, the thing I loved about the Eagles last year was their ability to win any type of game with their defense, back end of their defense, their pass rush, their run game, their pass game on offense, all of it. Maybe you lose a little bit of that. Maybe you get a little bit of regression from those older corners, James Bradbury and Darius Slay, because we didn't think they were going to be back this year, right? It was going to be really difficult for them to keep them. But do they have, just while we're talking Eagles, are there secret bookkeeping advantages that either the Eagles or there's no way that only two teams have access to this really shrewd way of working the cap and moving cash around. There's no way that exists, right? Again, there's 32 teams, there's 32 cap guys, there's a lot of smart people around the league. There's no way Howie and the Eagles have an edge, right? Like what is that world look like?
I'll say they don't have an edge in that they're doing things that are like illegal or gray area or whatever.
I wasn't suggesting illegal.
Suggesting
illegal. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, right. Just skirting the line. No, but when Howie Roseman's your GM and he has a cap guy background and then they have multiple other football administration people in the building, they have more ammo there and more people that are solely focused on finding edges, ways to construct contracts, ways to get out of money, to push money down the line in creative ways. It's not that other teams can't do it. It's that they aren't investing as many resources in finding ways to do it. So, to a degree, yes, they have an advantage. They have an edge. But also, at the end of the day, it comes back to an owner's willingness to do it, spend a whole lot of money and all these things. And they certainly have that with Jeffrey Lurie as well.
We have a request for the Jaguars and analysis on what the Jags are doing. One of the things that I like to look at around the league is how teams are constructing position groups. So there are some, like the Colts have 4 wide receivers and 5 tight ends, which is just inverted, right? That's odd. The Jaguars have 7 name receivers. A couple of them are special teamers. Jamal Agnew's a do-it-all type of player. But 7 receivers in name because they have a guy like Elijah Cooks who broke out in the preseason. They wanted to keep him. But the Jags, I'm a little worried about their offensive line the same way I'm worried about the Jets. What are your thoughts on what Jacksonville's done? Is their defense going to be good enough? And is Trevor Lawrence for real? Those are my big question marks going into the season.
Yeah, Elijah Cooks is super fun. I'm glad he made the roster. I thought he was awesome. I think it was week 2 in the preseason. But I'll say this, if Dan Arnold's a tight end, then Elijah Cooks is a tight end. But anyway, their offensive line is interesting. I do like Walker Little. I think Anton Harrison's going to figure it out. But that interior scares me because they already had injuries coming into the year. Ben Barch was down. They had a couple other injuries. And some of their young guys also got hurt during the preseason. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they overcome until Cam Robinson gets back. When he does return, does one of Harrison or Walker Little maybe kick inside to guard? In the meantime, that'll be interesting. And then the defense, like they're so young, so it could just be growth that we see, and they don't need to add talent. But the secondary outside of Tyson Campbell, yeah, it gives me a little reason for pause. But I think the offense is going to be dynamic, going to be explosive. They're going to score a whole lot of points. But yeah, you can still poke some holes in this roster.
Lions fans in the chat begging for some Lions analysis, Brad. We have, much like the Steelers this offseason, everybody's been talking up the Lions. You're looking at a roster where we were at camp a few weeks ago, and it is nice to see in real time, even if it's only for a day or two, what teams look like. But the depth that the Lions have now versus 3 years ago is like night and day. Players that are going to be backups that absolutely would have been playing 1,000 snaps for them just a couple of years ago. Are you as high on the Lions as maybe the public perception heading into the season?
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, you got me?
Lions analysis. We got you? You high on the Lions?
Steve, you got me?
I do. Yes. You can't hear me, though. Did I lose?
I got you. No, I got you. All right. So
Lions, baby.
We're talking Lions?
Yeah. Tell me about the Lions this year.
Yeah, let's talk Lions. Look, I do like the Lions. They're going to win the NFC North. I think they should be the prohibitive favorite in that division. But again, for me, you can poke some holes in that team. On the defensive line, on the interior, I do love Ali McNeil, but is Levi Onwuzurike going to be healthy enough to play? Do they have enough there elsewise? I love John Kaminsky. I think he can kick inside. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson showed last year he can kick inside as well. But that gives me a little bit of pause. But yeah, no, it's hard to find many big weaknesses on this team. Random throwaway, but if you're not drafting Jahmyr Gibbs in your fantasy league, I don't know what you're doing.
Oh, yeah, you can drop some fantasy nuggets in here. Only 2 running backs on the roster, right? Him and David Montgomery. So Gibbs, they're going to use him, right? They're going to use him. I think empty packages, they're moving him around. May have seen a play or two that looked pretty well designed for a pass-catching running back while I was there. Not sure how much we're allowed to disclose, but yes, agree. Jahmyr Gibbs, they're going to – we've talked about when we say don't draft running backs high, and then the pushback is like, well, look at the production these first-round running backs have. And then we, the analytics community, will come back and say, yeah, that's self-fulfilling, right? That's you drafted a guy high, you're going to feed that guy. You're justifying yourself. You're going to feed him, right? Like the Falcons aren't going out of their way to justify Tyler Algier in feeding him this year. They're just like, oh, we'll get somebody else. He was just a 5th rounder. But they're going to justify that. They're going to feed Bijan just like the Lions are going to feed Jahmyr Gibbs. So I agree with that.
Absolutely.
There's a question about the Texans' offensive line. So there's been a lot of turnover there the last couple of days. You got Kenyon Green is out for the season with a shoulder injury. He had a rough rookie season, 14th overall pick in 2022. He's out for the year. Juice Scruggs, rookie out of Penn State, has a hamstring injury. He's out 2 to 4 weeks, so he was going to be the starting center. And then the Texans trade for Kendrick Green from our Steelers, I guess. Your Pittsburgh Steelers now. Kendrick Green comes in, a guy that's struggled a little bit playing center for the Steelers. It looks like he's going to slot in at left guard right away. Jarrett Patterson now getting the start at center. To go with 3 veterans, Laramie Tunsil, Shaq Mason, and Titus Howard. But Titus Howard, of course, dealing with his own injury, and Josh Jones comes in with the trade from Arizona. It's weird to see that much offensive line movement. I know a lot of it's injury, but that's like 3 new starters between Kendrick Green, Jarrett Patterson, and Josh Jones in the last week for the Texans. So I don't know if that's going to affect C.J. Stroud early on with some inconsistency and just new names up front for Houston.
It's a little scary because they made it a priority, and in the beginning, they had an offensive line that got you excited. If you saw Kenyon Green take that step, obviously their 15th overall pick last year, who didn't play very well, but Kendrick Green was like lining up at fullback in Steelers camp and doing different things to justify being on the roster, which obviously I don't think he would have been, absent that trade. Love Shaq Mason, love Laramie Tunsil, and we do like Josh Jones. Think he's going to be fine, but also going to a new team, I do think it's going to hamper them because for me with the Texans, it was all right, the weapons are not very good, but his protection should be awesome. So maybe he'll have enough time for a guy to come open. Now it's like you need Nico Collins and Robert Woods and Tank Dell and Mechie, whatever, to separate quickly, get open. They're not going to do that on every snap.
Yeah, the little fragility up there with the offensive line. Another team where that might ring true, and I don't know, this is a bit of a theme here. We talked about the Jets' O-line, maybe Houston's offensive line. Do the Bills have a similar question there? So Spencer Brown at right tackle, he heads into year 3. He's their big question mark. They're trying to bring Jermaine Ifedi in there. I don't know if that was official or not. Did they bring Ifedi in to Buffalo as a backup?
I think the plan was to sign him. I'm not sure it's official yet, but I'm sure it'll get done. It's scary. It's a little scary for me there for sure. I mean, I do like adding the other Connor McGovern, who was very good for Dallas last year at left guard, and Deion Dawkins is a good player as well. But yeah, Spencer Brown did not look good in the preseason. I think Nick Herbig's highlight, the highlight of maybe the entire preseason, I think, was against Spencer Brown, and there are a handful of other pressures he allowed over the course of the 3 games. So it's concerning, but Allen does mitigate that to a degree. We'll see.
All right, I'll give one last call to the chat because I apologize to the social team that's going to be putting timestamps on all this, and it's like we had no plan whatsoever. Full disclosure, I had no order, right? We had a plan. We're going to talk ball, right? We're going to talk ball. We're going to talk rosters. That was the plan, but we had no order, right? We're just popcorning around, as we say on our stupid Zoom calls, right? Very business. You get popcorn around the league. That's what they say. I had another question though. Oh, this is my question, Brad. From a cap perspective, from a team building perspective, are there certain positions where it's easier to store depth? And if you were in position, because I got this question a while ago as GM Steve, where would I spend my extra roster spots? You got a 53-man. Are you hiding 7 receivers like the Jags are? All these teams that have O-line issues, you need to dress 8. But do you store 10, right, just to make sure that you have depth in-house and guys that can step in? Do you want to roll 9 deep on the defensive line and say we're gonna have everybody play at least 10 to 15 snaps and stay fresh? Do you want to have the secondary depth? Do you have a strategy on where you would play your depth, or is there a financial edge at some positions versus others?
So I got trenches on both sides of the ball, but there is an advantage. We're talking about the third quarterback rule earlier. They also made the rule a couple years ago now with the new CBA, where if you dress 10 offensive linemen, you're allowed to have 48 active players on game day. I think, and then if you have 9, I think you're allowed to have 47. So you're basically getting an extra active game day player if you have more offensive line. Also, we're talking about it's impossible to find good offensive line play, particularly depth, in the league. I think it's why spring football leagues don't even work. We talk about quarterbacks a lot, sure. I think offensive line may be the bigger problem. So I would go there. And then, yes, defensive line as well. I'm huge on, especially as contracts skyrocket, on this platoon approach. Like the Eagles last year, who obviously set records across the board. Yes, they have some awesome players, but I also think it's because they were just rotating guys in, had fresh bodies. No one played that much. So, yeah, for me it's trenches, no question.
Yeah, I don't know why, but the 17 game, I know it's just one extra week. It just feels more taxing. It's one extra game, but it's that plus there's one fewer bye, right? It does feel like the attrition aspect is more important than it's ever been. One extra regular season game, and even for some of the better teams in each conference, one extra playoff game. So it does feel like depth more important than ever. I know it always has been for the NFL when teams have a position group fall apart and it's really tough to compete, but that one extra game, man, it does feel like you might lean into keeping guys fresh, or a move like what Buffalo did. Hey, Von Miller's going to miss the first 4 weeks. That's fine. We're going to have to sacrifice something early in the season to make sure he's fresh because we're not making a deep playoff run if Von Miller's not there. I do think those decisions, a little different maybe than they were just a few years ago.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And this is anecdotal, but I can think of an Isaiah Hodgins or Rasul Douglas like easier than I can think of some trench player sneaking through and then becoming like a high-level starter. It's just, yeah, but I'm with you.
Yeah, and also for the teams that have a big-name quarterback, they're already paying him $50 million or whatever it is, and say the Bengals right here. you know you're going to have to pay Burrow. You know you're going to have to pay Jamar Chase. You want to pay T. Higgins. At some point, you got to have cheap at expensive positions. So keep drafting edge defenders or keep drafting offensive linemen or whatever it might be, because you have to save money somewhere, but you still want to have good players there. All right, let's wrap it up with this. Couple requests. We got the Bucs and Bengals. The Bucs are going to have, let me see, according to my sheet here, 13 rookies on the roster in Tampa Bay. 13, which includes 6 undrafted free agents per Jenna Lane of ESPN. 6 undrafted free agents, and it's not her report, but her report is the most of the Jason Light era for Tampa Bay. Another roster that's in an interesting spot because Baker Mayfield's a clear bridge quarterback, but you still have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That's a really nice foundation for throwing the ball. Dave Canales comes in to call plays, maybe make life easier on his quarterback this year. What are your thoughts on the Bucs in that weak NFC South?
Yeah, I think some of it is tied to injuries. Ryan Jensen obviously out for the year now. Russell Gage out for the year now as well. But they also should have a youth movement. I liked a lot of their draft. Excuse me. And I know they cut. I'm blanking on his name now. The 6th rounder, the edge rusher out of Eastern Michigan,
Jose Ramirez. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, I think you have to do this. They are, again, in that competitive rebuild, whatever buzzword you want to use right now. I don't think they're going to be as bad as some people think. I don't think they're a first overall pick caliber team just because some of the veterans on this roster are simply too good. And the NFC South is also simply too bad. But I like, Light turning over this roster. I think Light is very good at pre-Tom Brady and during Tom Brady and now. Be very aggressive in exactly what you're chasing, and then don't dilly-dally in the middle. Very quickly kind of get to the next phase. I think he's been good in that regard.
Awesome. So there we go. We touched on a lot of stuff here, Brad. I appreciate it. Anything else you want to add to the mix here? Anything else to keep an eye on here as we head into to week 1? What are you going to be watching here as we head into week 1, just almost a week away from opening night?
I'm not waiting for some of these extensions, man. I mean, Christian Wilkins sounds like it's not going to get done. Nick Bosa, it's really, really quiet for a lot of big name players. Brian Burns, Nick Bosa, etc. We're getting down to the wire here.
What does that end up looking like? Is that these guys might not be with their teams next year? They're trade candidates. If things start slow for the Panthers, is Brian Burns on the trading block again at the deadline? And did I see the trade deadline change this year? Did I miss that?
It's Halloween, which I think is earlier than it was last year.
Okay,
that was November 8th last year.
I saw somebody try to say it was October 1st, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. They just moved it back, which was great. When you move it back and it becomes a little more like baseball, you can actually pick someone up mid-season. That is a lot more fun. But are we talking about maybe not a Nick Bosa, but a Brian Burns as a trade candidate for a team that needs pass rush?
The Panthers turned down 2 firsts from the Rams last year and then traded him at this deadline. It's one of the biggest mishandlings of an asset I've ever seen in my entire life. So I hope not.
Yeah, we'll see. Man, what were the Rams thinking? Why would the Rams give up 2 firsts for Burns last year? No offense, Rams. I love you, Les. I know you might be watching. So just saying, we got people around the league. They like to watch. I love you, Les. I can't wait to watch the Rams this year with all their teenagers and Aaron Donald playing defense. All right, well, Brad Spielberger, appreciate you joining us here on the PFF NFL podcast. Follow Brad at PFF_Brad. That's your name, right? Yeah, just making sure. PFF_Brad. Follow him on Twitter. Thanks to Brad. I'll finish up with the solo shot here. Can we do that, Tyler? Thank you, Brad. I'll let you go. I just want to tell the people what to expect going forward. Ha! It's my show now. Sam's gone. Everybody's gone. It's just me. Stick with me for one more minute. Here's what we got coming down. I got Trevor Sikkema coming tomorrow to talk all things NFL draft. I've been grinding a little bit of draft film, so we're going to talk draft prospects, everything you want to see for college football this year from a draft perspective and a high-level view of what to expect next April. The quarterbacks to look for, which position groups are strong, weak, whatever it might be. And then we're going to have a bet show next week. It's not just a bet show. It's really a fan, listener, viewer prediction show. So your predictions. I might be more willing to take a few more bets this year from everybody. It doesn't Sam's not here, but I'm going to make a call. It doesn't have to be something that I completely am against. I'm here to just let people put their name on the line, something bold, right? Geno Smith's going to lead the league in touchdowns. Brock Purdy's going to be Super Bowl MVP. Whatever it might be. Be bold, and we'll put a PFF subscription, PFF Plus subscription on the line. But we're going to do that show on Monday or Wednesday. Yeah, probably Wednesday. And we're going to do our prediction show. So sometime next week, either Monday show or the Wednesday show, we have to get in all of our season bets and predictions from the fans and our prediction show. Yeah, that's what I said. So Monday, we'll do our predictions, Labor Day. And then Wednesday, you guys, you will do your predictions. And we won't take all of them. We'll take the ones that are bold or completely against what we believe. And we'll just track them during the season as a group. It's a family fun here. It's like guessing the jelly beans, you know? So we'll have some fun with that next week. Our prediction show, and then your prediction show, and then it's season preview. We'll be previewing season 1 and week 1 and right into the monster shows. 2-hour previews and 2.5-hour reviews and the whole thing. So anyway, we appreciate everybody. If you're new, we appreciate you joining us for the season. We have some fun. We just talk ball and who knows, ramble a little bit, talk baseball, talk rugby, but mostly talk football and try to touch on every team as much as possible. So we appreciate everybody for joining us live here on YouTube, and everybody who's listening for podcasts. We'll be back again tomorrow with more PFF NFL Podcast.